It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Pressure on the Chancellor as the cost of government borrowing soars, the pound slumps and shares fall. As North Korea's dictator arrives in Beijing for talks with China and Russia, President Trump dismisses concerns about a rival axis forming.
China needs us, and I have a very good relationship with President Xi, as you know, but China needs us much more than we need them.
Back here, councillors in Epping are refused permission to appeal over asylum seekers being housed at the Bell Hotel.
You got youth raping our kids.
Save our kids!
Police investigate after a Sky News interview about asylum seekers was interrupted by women shouting about rape. Plus, the new bills lying empty, how red tape is stopping thousands of people moving into their new home. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That is coming up in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening. Pressure is building on the Chancellor after a slew of financial data laid bare concerns about the state of the economy. The cost of long-term government borrowing hit a near 30-year high today. The pound dropped by more than 1% against the US dollar, and the FTSE 100 suffered its worst fall in 5 months. Downing Street insists that Rachel Reeves will stick to her fiscal rules, but as concerns grow about the state of the UK's finances, she now faces the prospect of hiking taxes in the budget to balance the books. In a moment, we'll assess the political choices facing the Chancellor, but first our economics editor Ed Conway has this analysis of the country's financial position.
Looking at markets at the moment, some extraordinary things really happening, starting with gilt yields. What are gilt yields? They're basically the interest rate that the government has to pay on its debt. And I said the government basically means all of us. This is showing you that interest rate on 30-year debt, so kind of the closest thing that there is to a mortgage. And that interest rate for the UK has gone up, and it's now at the highest level that it's been going all the way back to 1998. But it's worth just asking the question, is the UK an outlier? Are we the only one facing gilt yields as high as this? Well, in one sense, certainly yes, because if you compare other countries around the world, and in particular G7 nations, so other industrialised nations, this is showing the maximum, the minimum. The UK used to be more or less middle of the pack up until here, the mini budget, back in 2022. And look at the red line, OK, so that's spiked. But particularly look at it in relation to the rest of the other G7 nations. We just remained higher. And since the election, actually the UK's cost of borrowing has been higher than most other G7 nations. So definitely an outlier in that respect. And there's other bad news as well. That, you know, if you're the Chancellor, you don't like to see that last chart. You don't like to see this either, because this is the pound versus the US dollar. And just look at what has just happened to the pound. It's sunk. It's one of the biggest one-day falls that we've had in a long time for the pound. So those two things together, it's the kind of thing that people at the Treasury start to get worried about, raising the question, what's going on here? Well, one thing is what's going on with the public finances. I'll come to that in a second. But gilt yields are also affected, and to some extent the pound, by what's going on with inflation. And here, the UK is also a bit of an outlier. This is showing you the inflation rate for the UK, so CPI, the rate at which prices are changing each year. And you can see it's risen up relatively high in the last few months. And if you compare it not just to the Bank of England's 2% target, but to other countries, again, same thing that we did earlier, other countries in the G7, have a look. The UK is comfortably now got the highest inflation in the G7. So it's not just about the public finances, it's also about inflation. But when it comes to the public finances, obviously the Chancellor looking at this ahead of the budget that's coming up later on this autumn, there's an enormous question mark, OK? So right now, this is a projection for long-term revenues, so tax revenues for the government over the next few decades. OK, they're relatively flat there. Look at what happens to spending, just based on higher spending on health, higher spending on social security, higher spending on pensions. That's where it is at the moment. And if that red line is higher than the blue line, that means you're basically having to borrow more. Look at what happens in the coming years. So that is projected to go to over 200% of GDP, basically what the highest it's been in peacetime that we have ever seen before. And this is part of the reason, that gap between the two of them, is part of the reason why Rachel Reeves is going to be focusing on that when it comes to the budget coming up shortly.
Ed Conway there. Well, let's go live now to the Chancellor's official residence at number 11 Downing Street and our political correspondent Liz Bates. Liz, a tricky run-in to the budget gets tougher. Decision time is certainly looming.
Oh, it certainly is. And look, the picture painted there by Ed Conway was pretty stark, and there will be nobody that will be more unnerved by that than the person in number 11, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, because she is the person that will have to make those tough decisions. There is nothing that can undermine a government more than an unstable economy, and I'm afraid that is where the government, this government, is getting to. The reality of it is that every extra pound spent in borrowing is a pound that Rachel Reeves cannot spend delivering on the government's priorities, on the NHS, on education, on delivering on those promises they made to voters during the general election. It's incredibly destabilising. Her eyes will be on mid-November, the budget. We don't have the exact date for that yet, but we will find out tomorrow. That's when she needs to fill her 20, 30, 40 billion pound black hole in the public finances, and the higher borrowing costs push that much further to the higher end of that black hole. And so stark choices, cuts in public spending or higher taxes, those are the decisions that she will have to make. There are underlying economic factors that this government has been dealing with, that consecutive governments have dealt with. Low growth, low productivity. That is largely due to global and some domestic factors. Much of that is out of their hands. They inherited it, but they also have a serious political problem, which is that the big cuts that they tried to get through, less so on winter fuel payments, although there was some downgrading of that, but on the benefit cuts that they tried to push through. You remember there was a huge Labour rebellion over disability benefits. In the end, that was so diluted because of that rebellion from the Labour backbenchers that the government would save just a tiny proportion of the money that they hoped to. That creates, for the future, a huge political problem that they don't know if any big cuts to public spending that they may have to do, can they get it beyond their Labour backbenchers? Well, many Labour MPs believe they can't because of that defeat during the welfare bill. It was a moment of weakness. It could really harm them in the future. Now, there are a few things that are being considered. Taxes, there's been discussion about wealth taxes, changes to property taxes. That could be a place where Rachel Reeves raises a bit more money. Also, potential consideration of trying to have another go at pushing through those big welfare reforms that could save them a lot of money. But look, looking ahead towards conference season and beyond that to the budget, huge pressure on the Chancellor, huge pressure on the Prime Minister, many more difficult decisions to make, and made much more difficult by this rise in borrowing costs.
Liz, live for us there in Downing Street. Thank you. President Trump has dismissed concerns that China and Russia are forming an axis to challenge the US-led world order. He was speaking after North Korea's leader arrived in Beijing to attend a military parade tomorrow with his Chinese and Russian counterparts. We'll have more on the American reaction in a moment. First, our Asia correspondent, Helen Ann Smith, reports on how China is trying to send the US president a message.
Back on base in Beijing and visibly relaxed. If there is one message Xi Jinping was happy to land today, it is that this relationship is rock solid. There was a sense they went out of their way to show just how cozy things are. The intended audience, no doubt, an American president who had maybe hoped he could disrupt them a bit. Putin is here in part to join commemorations to mark 80 years since the end of the Second World War. But just listen to how he framed it. No doubts over whether China still backs him in the war he's currently waging.
The memory of being brothers in arms, trust, mutual assistance, firmness in defending common interests formed the basis of the comprehensive partnership and strategic cooperation between Russia and China in the new era. We were always together then, we remain together now.
Meanwhile, this city, this army is preparing. Wednesday will host a huge military parade here. Tens of thousands of soldiers, a demonstration of might, a show of total perfection. We were given rare access to film some of the rehearsals to capture the anticipation.
Parade training is the main focus every day. It's an utmost honor to be part of this military parade and to be reviewed by the party's Central Committee, by General Secretary Xi Jinping, and this solemn, dignified and sacred moment.
But the parade will be remarkable for who is here too. None perhaps more striking than North Korea's Kim Jong-un. He rarely leaves his hermit kingdom. He has never attended an event as big as this. There is a real dichotomy to the messaging here. On the one hand, China has spent the last few days telling the world it is the great bridge builder, the great convener of nations, the great preserver of a peaceful global order. But at exactly the same moment, this city is literally locking down ahead of one of the greatest shows of military might seen in many years that will be attended by some of the most controversial world leaders. It is messaging that perhaps only China could manage. The parade will bring vast swathes of Beijing to a halt. The police and the army are everywhere. Opinion amongst locals divided.
It's a little disruption for sure, a little impact, but we all understand.
It's a once-in-a-decade event that showcases the nation's strength. The occasional half-day disruption is no big deal.
This city knows the world is watching, and behind the strict precautions, there is a confidence about what it will show. Helen Ann Smith, Sky News in Beijing.
Well, President Trump has tonight said he's not at all concerned about the alliance forming around China and Russia. Here's what he had to say at the White House when questioned by reporters a short time ago.
Sir, China's having a massive military parade that President Putin and Kim Jong-un will be attending. Do you interpret that as a challenge to this? And are you concerned at all about those countries trying to be some sort of counterweight?
Not at all. China needs us, and I have a very good relationship with President Xi, as you know. But China needs us much more than we need them. No, I don't see that at all, no.
One more.
And I had actually a very good meeting with President Putin a couple of weeks ago. We'll see if anything comes out of it. If it doesn't, we'll take a different stance.
Well, let's go live to Washington and our US correspondent, James Matthews. So finally, we see him then, James, and brazen confidence about the pictures we're seeing from China.
Hi, Anna. Yeah, President Trump presenting as unbothered by events in China, but it has to be a concern. We had a split-screen moment. On the one hand, world superpowers, the very picture of a geopolitical shift to the east. That's the big world story at the moment, with the world's strongmen at the heart of it. The other picture was Donald Trump today at the White House, appearing as something of a sideshow in that news conference. China has always been the big adversary, and it's China presenting as a stable, reliable alternative to an unpredictable, isolationist United States. So Donald Trump, he faces questions over the hand that he has played and how he plays it from here, how he stays in the game and wields the kind of influence that America and the West demands. This, of course, Anna, was a White House appearance. There was something of a proof of life news conference. You'll be familiar with internet rumours over the weekend that Trump had actually died. That's what happens when you live stream your presidency. You go missing for a couple of days and the rumour mill goes into overdrive. So not for the first time in the Oval Office, we had a unique Donald Trump moment. He was asked by a reporter, how did you respond to news reports that you were dead? His answer was, I've been very active. That's fake news.
James, thank you very much indeed. Well, President Trump, as we were saying, on bullish form tonight about his health, as we heard from James, and about that rivalry with China. But should he be concerned about the apparent forming of a Beijing-led alliance? Our international affairs editor, Dominic Wycorn, is here. So should he? And are we fundamentally seeing the end of the fight for liberal democracy, Dominic?
I think he should be. We shouldn't over-egg it, but yes, he should be worried and we should be worried as well. You know, what we should do is take a step back here and look what's happened over the last 3.5 years. This is the culmination of a way this conflict has metastasised from what was the mad idea of one dictator to try and gobble up a neighbouring country to what is becoming a kind of clash of civilisations, East versus West. You know, you've got liberal Democrats, democracies in the West, Europe and America now supporting Ukraine and supporting Russia. You have North Korea and China, and they actively are doing so, particularly the Chinese, because they believe the longer this war goes on, the more divided the West appears to be. So that helps, further their aim of ultimate global domination by the Chinese. In the past, we would have been reassured by the fact that the strength of the free world, that its military might, the power of NATO. But with this American president, we can't really take any of that for granted. And he's also doing some strange things which are hard to understand, which aren't really helping the West. He's not doing what his allies say he should be doing, which is imposing severe sanctions on Russia to try and bring this war to an end. He keeps stopping short of that. But also, he is forcing India, one of America's sort of key allies, into the bosom of the Chinese, which we saw very graphically yesterday. So all of that is strengthening China and strengthening that Eastern sort of authoritarian axis. So what's at stake here, which I think should worry all of us, is who's going to win in this kind of clash of civilizations and cultures. On the one hand, you've got democracy, freedom, the rule of law, the kind of free world that we have grown up in and largely believe in. On the other hand, you've got very repressive societies and governments that believe in surveillance, censorship, and repression at the end of the barrel of the gun. At the moment, that side seems to be winning, and I think this is a pretty graphic display. The optics out of Beijing are very reassuring for dictators and for repressive regimes like the Chinese in particular. And I think what's not giving us much consolation is what we're hearing out of the White House. Donald Trump says China needs America more than America needs China. I think that's probably older thinking. China is now getting stronger. And the way that plays out, he will hope he's proven right. But I think, the fear is he won't be. And if he isn't, then we're all going to be paying the price.
Yes, and more pictures to come, obviously, in that military parade tomorrow. Dominic, interesting times. Thank you very much indeed. Now, police are investigating after a Sky News interview with a man in Nuneaton was disrupted by women shouting about rape. Local businessman Zahin was speaking to our correspondent, Shimon Freeman-Powell, about tensions in the community over asylum seekers when the incident happened. Shimon has more from Nuneaton.
I spent several weeks here in Nuneaton, and the whole point was to try and find out how people really feel about the increase of asylum seekers. And I think what my report revealed is that there is tension, there is anger, and there is frustration. But what it also highlighted is what can happen when that frustration is misdirected.
The issue we have in our country, you got to use raping our kids. This is our country. How about becoming your country and do that in your kids? Never going to happen. Never going to happen, mate. We won't do that. When we become your country, do that to your kids. We're going to head beheaded. These are our children. No, mate.
What are you teaching them kids? You're mouthing
all right. No.
Go
on.
Say something about my kids. Go on. The camera's rolling. I don't care. Just relax.
Now, it's a report that really has sparked a national conversation and highlighted the tensions here. But it's also illustrated that the issue is far bigger than just housing asylum seekers in hotels, because here in Nuneaton, they're living in dispersal accommodation in residential areas. And it's forced politicians to really think about what they are going to do with the increase of asylum seekers coming here, because whilst they're waiting to be processed, they do need to be housed. But perhaps this report has also made politicians think about how they're going to address community tensions.
Epping Forest District Council says it's been refused permission to challenge a court decision which allows asylum seekers to continue to be housed at the Bell Hotel. A series of protests have been held outside the property in Essex after an asylum seeker living there was charged with the alleged sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl. He denies those charges. Well, let's bring in our correspondent, Oliver Whitfield-Mircic, who is here with me. So is this the end of the legal road for the council then, and what are we expecting the reaction to be?
So it's not the end of the legal road, because the Conservative-run council can now go straight to the Supreme Court and seek that appeal itself. That's something that the council says it's keeping an open mind on in terms of the legal next steps. And clearly it's something that Chancellor Chris Whitbread, who runs the council, says he believes today's decision was wrong, but he's calling on protesters to think calmly and considerably about their next steps, because this is a local authority that has been riven by, at times, quite violent protests over the past few weeks. People have been arrested. We've seen people taken before the courts. Even some of those protesters warn that they will face prison time for some of their actions. In terms of the reaction locally, I think this is something that residents want the council to do. They are concerned about their safety, they're concerned about the unrest that they're seeing. In terms of the reaction from the government's all got its hands tied. It doesn't have anywhere to house asylum seekers otherwise. It sees the appeal that it has won as the right course of action. It's a really, really tough... just look at what we've seen in the report by Shaman there. There is a lot of strong feeling about this.
Oliver, thank you. The Taliban says the number of people killed following Sunday's earthquake in eastern Afghanistan has risen to 1,400. A second earthquake hit the same region today, causing panic and further hampering rescue efforts. Our international correspondent John Sparks has this report.
The vigour and the violence of this earthquake is obvious from the air. Where homes and farms once stood, piles of dust and rubble take their place. Village life now transplanted to the surrounding fields. On the ground, the scale of this disaster and its human consequences will take longer to realise. Many here have lost their homes, and many too have lost their loved ones, buried under brick and wood and mud. There are survivors as well, pulled from the wreckage on people's backs and beds. We were under the soil, said this man, then rescued. My wife, my son, my grandchildren were buried under my house. This was God's test. More than 1,400 people have died, says the governing Taliban, a number, according to the UN, that is bound to surge. Rescue teams simply cannot reach the worst affected areas. In a voice note, a doctor from charity Halo Trust describes this logistical nightmare.
The situation was devastating. All the roads were blocked. When they arrived to the scene, there was lots of tremors. Rocks were still falling from the mountains on the main road.
The only source of aid comes from above. A couple of helicopters operated by the Taliban, ferrying in people and supplies and taking the casualties out. The Red Cross says more than 3,000 have been injured. The Taliban is now pleading for financial assistance, but the international community remains wary of them. The UK will provide £1 million to UN agencies, but the Red Cross says that's not enough.
We're already in touch with the European Union. They are trusted partners in delivering humanitarian aid in Afghanistan. So we're hopeful on that front. The big question mark, obviously, is the American government as to whether they will revisit the decision they've made not to provide humanitarian assistance into Afghanistan, given this new, very serious crisis on our hands right now.
The magnitude of human need cannot be disputed. For those buried under the rubble and those likely to be ignored, the Taliban restricts and segregates women and girls. The days ahead will be difficult indeed. John Sparks, Sky News.
More than 1,000 people are reported to have been killed in a landslide in western Sudan. It struck on Sunday in the Mara Mountains in North Darfur state, following days of heavy rain. A former inmate has been sentenced to at least 45 years behind bars for murdering an ex-prison officer in Lancashire. Elias Morgan killed Lenny Scott as an act of retaliation after he exposed a sexual relationship between Morgan and a female prison guard at HMP Altcourse in Liverpool.
We are so angry that Lenny was killed because he was doing the right thing, doing his job well with pride and integrity and maintaining his strong values. Despite being threatened by Morgan, he stuck to his values and followed prison procedure. He lost his life standing up for what was right. Morgan has no regard for the impact of his actions. He not only has stolen Lenny's future, but he has stolen our future with him. Lenny now won't achieve all the things he was working towards, all the plans he had with his children, his chance to see them grow and flourish. that has been taken away from us all.
The Father Ted co-creator Graham Linehan has spoken out after being arrested at Heathrow Airport on suspicion of inciting violence in relation to posts on the social media platform X. He said he was detained by 5 armed police officers after arriving on a flight from Arizona. He said his arrest is related to 3 posts he made in April about transgender people. Bin workers in Birmingham have voted to extend their strike past Christmas and into spring next year. A ballpark deal had been agreed to end the long-running strikes over pay cuts, but Unite, the union involved in the talks, accused the government of scuppering an agreement. Birmingham residents have been paying millions for agency workers to step in instead. And let's show you some live pictures of the Kilauea volcano, which has begun erupting again in Hawaii. It is the 32nd such event since December. Some really dramatic pictures there. Scientists, though, believe they're all part of the same eruption because magma has been following the same pathway to the surface. A Sky News investigation has found that hundreds of completed homes have been left empty because of delays by the government's building safety regulator. We've discovered that the properties are still waiting for approval, with red tape also preventing the construction of new developments. Our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, has more.
Newly built flats in a country that desperately needs them. Keys ready for people to move into their own home.
This is 99 apartments.
Estate agent Jamie has already sold dozens of them.
So this is our show home. We have 1 and 2 bedroom apartments for sale here. And the type of buyers that move in are first-time buyers, young families.
But there's a twist. Contracts exchanged, hopes raised, but the buyers still can't move in. This block was completed over a year ago, but the building safety regulator hasn't signed it off.
The carpets are down. The couple who bought this, they worked really hard to save for their deposit. 14 months they've been waiting to move in because the building safety regulator never tell us when they're going to sign the paperwork off.
After the Grenfell Tower fire claimed 72 lives, a new building safety regulator, the BSR, was set up to ensure high-rise developers don't cut corners and risk safety. But 2 years on, and it's causing its own problems.
So what I've seen, there's nothing apparent that it's going to cause a building any real issues. As an example, signage has been 2 millimetres too small to sign off, and so the developer has to change all the signage, which is fine, but at 2 millimetres to cause a 14-month delay, it just doesn't make sense.
This block is not the only one affected by the regulator's delays. Sky News has discovered there are still 1,210 completed homes waiting for the BSR to sign them off. And it's not only finished buildings that are at the mercy of the new safety regulator. Following the Grenfell fire, nobody wants to be seen on the side of high-rise property developers. But if we're going to meet the 1.5 million new homes target, they're going to have to be built. And what's clear is this government is overseeing a system of regulating that building that's just not fit for purpose. So what are you going to build here?
So we've got planning for 352 apartments, and 166 of those homes will be for social rented housing.
This site in South London should be in full swing by now, but it and tens of thousands of other homes are still hanging on months delayed approval.
We currently have 3 applications. The current dates that we're looking at that they've given us, one is 6 months, one is 9 months, and one is 12 months. We have tens of millions of pounds tied up in the 3 sites.
This government is desperate to build houses. This doesn't sound like it's helping.
No, definitely not, Sam.
New buildings should be signed off within 12 weeks, but Sky News can reveal that the percentage of applications determined inside this period is falling from 47% at the end of September to 32% by the end of March, and the backlog is growing faster than the BSR can tackle its cases. In a statement to Sky News, the BSR said setting up the new safety body has been complex and huge progress has been made. They are now working closely with industry to deliver safer, higher quality buildings. But But the BSR also point the finger at developers, blaming the quality of their applications, a claim vigorously contested by the industry. Ultimately, the BSR is a branch of government, and housing bosses think it's ministers who should carry the can, while the regulator itself has been given a hospital pass. Without a fix, Keir Starmer's housing target looks harder by the day. Sam Coates, Sky News, Greenwich.
Now, the Northern Lights were visible in parts of the UK overnight and may be seen again tonight following a powerful solar storm. The Met Office says the resulting geomagnetic activity could make the aurora visible much further south than normal if the skies are dark and clear. Not sure about that today. Last night, certainly, stargazers reported sightings in Scotland, northern England and the Midlands, with images captured as far south as West Cork in Ireland. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we will take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by The Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the PR consultant Alex Dean. Welcome and great to see both of you. Certainly among the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Financial Times. Reeves's leeway shrinks as the pound falls and borrowing costs hit a 27-year high. That and plenty more, of course, when we come back.